All right. We are on the air. Grant, how are you?
Mark, I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming aboard. I got to tell all the brand DIYers out there that this conversation is about to take a turn for the weird because I have been working with Grant for quite a while now. And the reason I want to bring him aboard today was because he is an absolute RoboCop when it comes to acquiring new business. He's at 300% over capacity of what he can do. He keeps calling me up and saying, Mark, can you help out on this? Can you help out on that? I'm like, how do you do that? And I was under the impression that it's all SEO because Grant also told me I do about 5 minutes of biz dev every month, every week. And I'm like, oh my God, the brand DIYers have to hear this. It's SEO and 5 minutes of biz dev. It's a dream come true. And then we had this conversation. Why don't you just tell me what we just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few people over the years kind of ask me how we maintain our lead generation rate or how we manage to, we refer out quite a bit of business to great contractors and consultants like Mark here. And it really just all has to do with being able to notice and recognize businesses just out in the world that are struggling in one way or another, and being able to know the right people to talk to and basically say, hey, I can recognize that you have a problem here. Are you interested in a solution to that? Now, they're not always going to say yes because people get very attached to their problems. But for the most part, when it comes to marketing, especially, it's usually a fairly easy conversation for us because most people very rarely feel that their marketing is the absolute best that it possibly could be. So there's a lot of opportunity to talk to people about their marketing, what they're doing from a sales or a business development perspective. And a lot of those people have, in a lot of cases, never had someone externally look at any of those systems before. 98% of websites don't track conversions. You know, people aren't, as the old saying goes, they're not measuring, so they're actually not managing. So half of what we do, and what we do, is realistically no different than what the big guys at Adobe and IBM and Deloitte are doing. Is they're focusing very heavily in data analytics and really seeing, okay, how do we get a very clear picture of what's going on inside of the business data? And then it's all just about picking insights outside of that. And what we've developed is a process that's very easy for us to just look through almost any business's data and be able to pull out things or insights that are either going to confirm what they already know, which clients always like, or it's going to give them a very interesting view into what their customers and how they're behaving with their social media or their website that a lot of people aren't actually going to know. So I talk to a lot of people that are just getting started in this industry, and they get very, I would say, a lot of self-confidence or self-esteem issues about, oh, well, I'm talking to these big CEOs or I'm talking to these successful business owners. I'm just a marketing guy. What do I know about this stuff? And then as you're in these conversations more and you get so many Fortune 100 emails from CEOs saying, like, how do I get into my email? You can see that there's a definite gap, and specifically on the data intelligence side of, do people actually know what's going on in their business, and are they able to make decisions based around that?
So fundamentally, what you're saying, I think there's a real problem in the world of digital today, in that I go onto YouTube and I see a guy going, oh my God, they're not using Facebook properly. Oh my God, how could they not be doing this? Oh my God, they're not using Instagram properly. How could they not be doing this? You should be doing this. You should be doing remarketing. You should be doing content. You should be doing SEO. And people are like, and they don't know how to do any of it. But what you're telling me, it's so much more fundamental. It comes right down to, what the hell message are you putting out there? And are you figuring out if anybody even cares?
Exactly.
It's that simple.
It's that
All right.
simple.
So I'm right out of the garage. What do I do? Where do I start? I'm totally frustrated, and everybody keeps telling me to get on Instagram, and I don't know an Instagram from a taxi. It's just like,
Yeah, totally. I would say that a lot of people are going to have a lot of advice, and some of it's going to be conflicting. And what I've learned is that most of the time, all of the advice is right. It's just a matter of context. So depending on who your business is, who it services, who you want to get it in front of, is really going to dictate where you should start. are the people that you want to get in front of on Instagram? If they are, then absolutely get on Instagram, get on Facebook, if that's where your people are hanging out. If they're not hanging out there, then you don't necessarily need to be there. You know, Lamborghini, I think, has this very famous quote where they say, we don't run TV commercials because the people buying Lamborghinis are not sitting around watching TV. Now, ironically, they do run Facebook and Instagram ads. So that tells me something interesting about the kind of people that are sitting around there. So if there were to be like 3 places to start, it's you definitely want to claim your social media profiles. A, because you just don't want someone else to essentially pretend that they are who you are. So you want to claim those profiles, even if you do nothing with them. And then from there, and because I grew up, or I brought my first few businesses up with organic social media, I would say that that's extremely difficult to do now, and it's going to be extremely time consuming to do that because Facebook isn't monetized to making their organic content work. They're really trying to make it more difficult for you and basically saying, if you're not making viral content, we're not going to promote that organically. So, and I wouldn't recommend that most businesses go and try to be viral with every single post, unless, because it can come off very inauthentic that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of people, the answer has been and probably will continue to be for the next little while to have a website, to have something that you can specifically transfer from one host to another, something that you can keep, and something that's actually considered an asset of your business. So when we talk with business evaluators, they actually treat your website as an asset of your business. Whereas unless you have millions and millions of followers on your social media profiles, that's typically not getting factored into there. So ensuring that you have a website that is, you know, fits within your budget, but that you also have control and that you can have multiple people work on, or that you can switch from platform to platform is always going to be a better idea. So that's why a lot of people I know, their WordPress is very popular, because WordPress, you can literally copy and paste from one environment into another. So no one can really realistically ever take WordPress away from you. However, when you're dealing with something like Wix or Squarespace or even Shopify, because those are hosted within those platforms, if you ever wanted to say, take your Shopify website away from Shopify, you have to completely rebuild your website that way. And that's going to be the same with a lot of content management systems, but you definitely want to make sure that you're controlling the things that are important to you. So if you're a small local business and you know that people are going to have to find you on Google search, then I would say stick with a really simple platform that's already going to be built for SEO quite well. And really, if you're going to spend any money on it, spend some money on hiring someone who is an SEO consultant or a specialist to come in and do a paid audit specifically. If you're hiring on any SEO and they're just saying like, hey, $500 a month and we're just going to get going, that's not SEO. For SEO to really have any meaningful effect on search engines, they have to look before they leap, and they have to do quite a bit of looking into that data before they can really start to determine what to do and how to optimize those channels. So if you're going to just get started, the free option is absolutely get your social media profiles up. And if you only have $10, throw it towards Facebook ads, throw it towards Instagram ads. You can collect leads, you can get phone calls, you can get sales that way. And then once you have a little bit of money, and I would say most people that see results from their websites, I very rarely see people that spend $500 on a website and have it generate a single piece of business for them. I wish that it could. If we ever did run across that, then that would be immediately something we do with all of our clients. Most people that end up getting a website developed and it performs for them is usually not going to come for less than, I'd say, around $5,000. But you can do a lot of sales on social media to get you to up to that point. And then when you're ready to invest in a high quality website, to go ahead and do that. And when you do talk to a web developer, you want to make sure that they at least understand the basics of how search engines operate, because we do come across a lot of websites that people have spent money on, and they unfortunately the search engines hate them for just different reasons reasons in the way that they're built up or just weird ways that they were done. And unfortunately, fixing a lot of those things or having to rebuild a lot of that stuff, a lot of the times ends up being more expensive than whatever they originally spent on the website. So if people aren't sure, start with social. And when you are ready to go into the realm of the website, definitely make sure that it's something that you research and that you're working with a good partner with, because a lot of people do get burned that way by not taking those steps.
Now, you and I had a great conversation. I was in Calgary a couple of weeks ago and I had breakfast with you. We had a great conversation about Google AdWords.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things I said, well, yeah, I used to have a client and we went to Facebook ads because Google is really expensive. And he goes, it's not, you're making the wrong measurement. What you should be measuring is how many people come and buy stuff off of Google versus how many people come and buy stuff off of Facebook. I'm like, oh. And why don't you just explore that too? Because I think a lot of times people are measuring the wrong thing. They're getting sold a bill of goods. You do this, it's going to get you this many clicks. It's going to get you this much click through. It's not, and that's the wrong measurement. It's how much money you're going to make is the right measurement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Google knows how much money they make. Facebook knows how much money they make. And a lot of the way that those two companies make money is by assuming that you don't actually know how much money you're making. So as the old John Wanamaker quote goes, it's a lot easier to make money off advertising if you have no idea which 50% is actually working. So when we start getting conversion tracking set up with people, and when we can actually get it directly tied to, okay, this is what you spent, this is how much money you made, we see that John was actually a little bit farther off. It's closer to 80 to 90% of what people spend, even on digital advertising, never results in a direct transaction. So if you know that, and if you can understand that, you can, if you wanted to, completely slash your advertising budget in half, just push that towards what actually is working. And then all of a sudden you look like an advertising superhero, because all you're doing is essentially managing that media spend and putting it to where it's working. Now, you would think that this would be like grease lightning and this is what most people would do, but 98% of the businesses that we come across don't track revenue to their marketing efforts. And we work with very large organizations and very large companies that their main KPI for their marketing department is either how many clicks they get, how many impressions they get, or in some cases, just how many leads they're getting filled out on their website. It's not associated to transactions. It's not associated to revenue or even profit. And if you can actually associate that to profit, that's where things get really interesting. Because if you can have the conversation with your clients about what are their loss leaders and what are their high profit items, by focusing on those higher profit items, and if you can really push those transactions and that revenue, your client's going to be much happier, because even if they're spending the same amount on advertising, they're going to be making more money. And that's what, at the end of the day, everyone really wants to be doing. KPIs are great. They're a nice little pat on the back, to see how many followers you got, or how many impressions, how many leads, how many people are engaging with your content. But as anyone in market research will tell you, what people will tell you and what people will do are two completely different things. It's much easier to get someone to say that they like you than it is to get someone to pay you. So as long as we're helping distinguish those two, we usually see good results. And if people are wasting less money on advertising, then I think that works better for everyone.
It's so true. I mean, with social media, I always think it's funny. I mean, I have 5,000 or whatever followers on Twitter, and I go, I don't think any of them would actually help me on moving day. It's the real difference between my Twitter friends and my friends. And that's totally the case. So what is the most common, if you're working with small businesses, what is the most common mistake that they make where you just go, oh my God, this is totally textbook?
The most common mistake would just be not tracking their leads or their conversations or their conversions that are happening with customers. I can't tell you how many large, plumbing companies that are doing, let's say over $5 million a year are not tracking where their phone calls are coming from, which makes up 80 to 90% of their business. So with a very simple piece of software, and we use CallRail for a lot of it, by, setting them up with $100 piece of software that tracks their calls and can actually show them where their calls are coming from, we've had clients that are able to double the amount of leads and revenues that they're bringing in off the same ad spend, simply because they're just saying, well, we spent $5,000 trying to get these people to call us, but they didn't. So do we keep spending money there, or do we just essentially call it a loss, cut that budget from there and reallocate it elsewhere? And if you cut that budget and reallocate it to somewhere where you can say, oh, if we spend $5,000, we're going to make $20,000, it just makes a lot more sense that way. So the number one thing, and this hasn't changed in the past 5 years with everything new that's come out, people still aren't tracking conversions or revenue as well as they think that they are. And there's still a huge attribution issue from seeing, okay, where are our customers coming from versus where are they first hearing about us? And I think anybody who solves that issue is going to be very well off.
Now, there's unfortunately, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around this too. Is there any guidebook or a book, that you've read where you go, oh, this guy actually makes it make a lot of sense?
Avinash Kaushik, who's the evangelist over at Google, he did write a couple of very good books, Web Analytics and Web Analytics 2.0. And I would say a lot of the things in there are going to be very relevant today, even though a lot of the platforms that he's talking about have completely changed since that book went out. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of books actually about that cover this area. There's not a lot of information that covers this area. Even when I did my master's in digital marketing program, when we covered analytics, they were saying, yeah, analytics is really tough. You should talk to someone about that. So and it really, realistically, it doesn't need to be as difficult as it has to be. So I think a lot of the analytics information that would be widely available to people is going to be in blogs like Simo Ahava has a very good blog that covers more of the technical aspects of Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. And I highly recommend that anyone that's curious and interested or learning a little bit more about that, check out his blog. And there's definitely a few people within the industry to follow. Annie Cushing, I believe, just wrote a book called Making Data Sexy, which I could be completely wrong on that book. So I apologize, Annie, if I got that wrong, but it's Annie is great. And Annie has, I believe, actually, Mark, worked with you and I on a couple of projects, and she's been absolutely fantastic with helping derive the insights from the data that way. I hope that kind of answers.
Yeah, to me, I'm also a big believer in outsourcing the stuff that I don't do really well. I know there's some people who nerd out and they dig deep into it, but I see a lot of people who dug deep into all the shiny objects, and they just get themselves in a ton of trouble because nothing works, and they've got a whole back room full of social media tools and software fixes and hacks they never use. They're completely useless and they're behind. So, I mean, if I was to come to you and say, I'm just out of the garage, I want to make sure that I can track the people who are coming to me and buying stuff. And I want to be able to do this, on a DIY kind of budget. If you were making that call out to a specialist like yourself, is there a sort of a package that you imagine a DIYer could suggest? Say, for $100, could you like 3 things, 4 things, or a workshop type thing? Could you assign me some homework that I could do? Is there anything like that where I lean on an expert? I don't have to figure it out myself, but I still get to DIY a lot of the work. Do you offer anything like that, or do you know people who do?
Yeah, absolutely. Google has I would say, a version of this within, I think it's Google Ads Academy or Skill Shop. They changed the name of it a couple times in the past couple of years, but there is a Google Analytics certification in there that does go over the basics of how to set up Google Analytics and how to really interpret some of the reports in there. And Google Analytics is free. Google makes their money off of data. So if you opt into their data collection, they're obviously going to make that free for you. So you can glean a lot of insights about what's going on with your business just from, signing up to Google's free analytic products and then going through the trainings on those. if you are looking at taking that to the next level and tightening that up a bit, I know a few different agencies that'll set up a single Google Analytics view for around $6,000, but that's going to be more on the enterprise side of things. So as far as actual workshops, I don't actually know of any. I might have to set one up. Mark, you might have to
Well,
help me.
that to me, it just seems like it's not a DIY, it's not a DFY done for you, it's a DWY done with you.
Mhm.
If they're coming out of the garage, it's probably a skill that they should kind of get a handle on, even if they're not going to be great at it. But to avoid that bloody nose as you run into the learning curve, that having an expert sort of guiding them, mentoring them, what to look out for, what not to look out for, because there is such a sea of bullshit out there and confusion and conflicting advice, that to land on a place that just goes, it's as simple as what are you putting out there? How many people are calling you? How much money you making? Let's start with that. Holy, that's a breath of fresh air in this sea of digital confusion.
Well,
So
then I think you could really break it down to there's two different types of digital advertisers or digital marketers right now. There's the ones that are going to get super bogged down with the technical specifics of how things work and really complicated campaign structures and technical stuff. And we see plenty of that going on. But then there's also going to be the, I would say more traditional marketers who are saying, okay, how much money did we spend? How much money did we make back? Do we spend more? Do we spend less? Can it be optimized? Can it not be optimized? Both work, but I would say that if you're looking as a business owner or as a senior level marketer to get a very basic overview of this, I would say definitely be more like the second. Focus more on how much money you're spending and how much money is coming back in. And if you are working with a marketer, with an agency that seems to be more interested with metrics that have to do more with clicks or impressions or things of that nature, then I would say always do your best to bring them back to how much money the company is making and to ensure that that return is maintained, especially anytime you're spending money. On the organic side of things and with SEO, you can focus a little bit more on bringing in traffic and bringing in organic impressions because you're not paying for each click individually. When you are paying for each click individually, like you are with Facebook and Google or Google Ads, you definitely want to make sure that you're making money off of every one of those clicks or as many of those clicks as possible.
All right, so I'm gonna recap. The trick would be to go to Google and figure out at least a little bit how to work the analytics. How are you converting what you put out there to people coming to your site? And that's a real common sense kind of equation. How many people are coming to me? Is the phone ringing? If they want to go one step further on that, they could go to Annie Cushing, Making Data Sexy. They could potentially they could reach out to you on Brand DIY. You're one of the members, and you
Absolutely.
could maybe guide them, give them a couple of tips. And if I think it's money well spent because if you say, I've got to sell my bath salts or my ball bearings or something, and I'm not making any money, well, $5,000 isn't the world either in order to make the cash register ring.
No.
It would seem
Well,
like
and not to
a
get
limited
clarity.
engagement with you to say, get this working, and then the cash register will ring. That seems like kind of money well spent.
That's exactly it. Money well spent. If you only have so much money to spend, you want to spend it in the best areas. So you gotta make sure that you can see where those best areas are.
Yeah. The only problem is you're at 300% over capacity.
Yeah, that's the
Oh,
downside.
you can't actually help. So anyway,
As soon as we increase capacity, I will absolutely help.
exactly. Anybody watching this video, don't call Grant expecting him to help you personally for $5,000. You can tap his brain for free on Brand DIY for
$20
little bits of information, and maybe he'll guide you in the right direction, but he could probably also point you to people that he trusts.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Grant, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. And I think that it's invaluable because it's a sea of confusion and frustration out there. And it is a simple equation. What are you putting out, and is it making the cash register ring? Even I get that.
Clarity and simplicity works.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mark.
Take
Have a
care.
good day.
Bye.